All right, so now we're talking about dividing a polynomial by a binomial, and there are 3 easy steps that you can use to do this. So step 1 is to factor your numerator and denominator. So right now our denominator is totally factored, so we're good. We're going to just factor out the numerator, okay? And I know that I need to figure out a number that multiplies to get -8 but adds together to get 7. And I know to get -8 that I can use 8 times 1, and that'll give me 8. But then I need to figure out which one of these I need to make negative because it's a -8. Since I want a positive 7, I'm going to use a -1 here. So I'm going to have x plus 8, and then x minus 1, all over x minus 1. Okay? And then step 2 says to cancel out any common factors. So in this case, I have x minus 1 and x minus 1. So I'm going to cancel those out. Once I cancel those out, whatever I'm left with is my answer. So in this case, my answer is x plus 8. Okay, so we're going to try just a couple, and then you're going to try them on your own. For number 1, we're just going to quickly go over this one. Again, step 1 is to factor your numerator and denominator. And I know that 7 times 3 is going to get me to 21, and that 7 plus 3 can get me to 10. But since it's a -10 and a positive 21, both of my factors are going to be negative. So I'm doing x minus 7 and x minus 3 all over x minus 7. Okay, and then step 2 is to cancel out my common factors. So we're going to cancel out the x minus 7, and I am left with x minus 3 as my final answer. All right, so we're going to try number 4. Number 4, you're not going to have 2 binomials here. You're going to have a monomial and a binomial, because this is just a binomial here. When you have a trinomial, you end up with 2 binomials. But this one is not a difference of squares. So we're going to go ahead and just factor out our common factor. So our common factor here is going to be 2, because the common factor between 2 and 16 would be 2. But then we also have r squared and r. So my common factor between r squared and r is r. So I have 2r. And then I'm going to go ahead and divide 2r out of each part. So if I divide that out of here, I'm left with an r. If I divide that out of here, I'm left with an 8. And then this is all over r plus 8. And then I'm going to go ahead and cancel out my like terms, my common factors there. And I am left with 2r as my final answer. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and hop onto the back. We're going to go to number 12. So for number 12, we have this trinomial, but we have a 2 here, and then we have our binomial. It's still the same process. It's set up a little differently, but it's the same idea. Step 1 for number 12 is to make sure, first of all, that we're pulling out any common factors. We can do our slip and slide technique, but first we want to make sure there are no common factors before we go ahead and try slip and slide. So for this one, I see 2, -4, and -70. These are all even numbers, so I do know that 2 is a factor in all of them. So I'm going to pull the 2 out, and I'm going to be left with d squared minus 2d minus 35. Okay, so now I can go ahead and factor this. Make sure we keep that part there. So let's go ahead and factor this. So when I factor it, I've got d squared, so I've got d and a d. I'm trying to get something to multiply to get -35, but add together to get -2. And I know that 7 times 5 is 35. But since I want this -2, I should make the 7 the negative. So when I add, my number stays negative. Okay, and then all of this is over d plus 5. And then I'm going to go ahead and cancel out those common factors right there. So now I'm left with 2 times parentheses d minus 7. And this is my final answer. Okay, so we got 2 more we're going to do. Number 15. This one has 4 terms. And if you remember when we talked about how to simplify polynomials, you need to cut this, split it in half. If you need to, you want to rearrange it, but we can go ahead and just simplify this as is. So I've got x to the third and then -x squared y. So I'm going to go ahead and pull out an x squared from the first part and then simplify the rest. And then for the second part, I have -6 and a positive 6. But I want this symbol in the middle here, this plus, I want this to be a negative. So in order to do that, I have to pull a -6 out. So that way I can change this to a minus. Okay, And then all of this is going to be simplified into two new binomials. So let's go ahead and write those. We're going to have x squared minus 6. Remember to take those outside pieces into 1. And the other one, and then putting it all over x minus y. I can cancel out my common factors. And I am left with x squared minus 6. Okay, the last one I want to do is 17. I'm just go ahead and get you started on this one. Actually, we're just going to go ahead and do this because this one involves a slip and slide. So 17, we have a rectangle has an area of 12m squared minus 7m minus 10. If the width of the rectangle is 3m plus 2, write an expression to represent the length of the rectangle in simplest form. So first of all, to find the area of a rectangle, we know that this area equals length times width. But I want to create this so that we're solving for the length. So if you remember back to when we solve literal equations, to solve for L, we need to divide both sides by W to get rid of that W. So length equals our area divided by our width. So when we set this up, we're going to do our length equals our area of 12m squared minus 7m minus 10, all divided by 3m plus 2. Okay, so now to solve this, I need to use my slip and slide. So I'm going to slip my 12 to the end, so then I have m squared minus 7m minus 120. And now I need to go ahead and simplify this. And whenever I'm looking for the numbers that multiply to get 120, I can go ahead and write out my factors. Okay, so I know 1 and 120 works. I know 2 and 60 works. I know 3 and 40. I know 4 and 30. I got 5 and 24. 6 and 20. None of these have worked yet, so it's 8 and 15. And I know that 8 and 15 is going to work because 15 minus 8 is 7. So I'm going to go ahead and use 8 and 15. So I need it to be a negative 7, so I'm going to make the 15 my negative number when I'm going and simplifying this. So I'm going to bring this up here. So now I have 8, or m, sorry. We'll do plus 8, and then m minus 15. Okay, so now that I've simplified it here, I need to make sure I'm reusing that 12. We're going to slide it down here to divide, and we're going to slide it over once we simplify. So I know that 8 over 12 can simplify to be 2/3. Okay, and negative 15 divided by 12 becomes 5/4. Okay, so now I can go ahead and slide these back over. So now I have 3m plus 2, and then 4m minus 5. And all of this, we'll bring back the original, is over 3m plus 2. Okay, cancel out our common factors. And my final answer is 4m minus 5. Okay, so that one's a little complicated, but it's still the same process. It's just incorporating a lot of things that we've learned. The slip and slide method, literal equations, the new thing of our dividing up polynomials by binomials. So you're going to go ahead and you're going to practice the rest on your own.